Atheism is changing the game for preachers today. By the way, I'm Joe. This is the Rebel's Advocate. So I've noticed lately there's been a change in the way preachers are preaching today, and even people are testifying and talking about God today compared to how they did when I was a kid. It's changed drastically, and I think atheism is the reason for that. And not just atheism itself, but the fact that atheism is growing, and maybe even those that aren't atheists, people all of a sudden it's more acceptable to maybe ask questions. People are questioning their God, and that's a scary thing if you're a Christian or a Muslim or Hindu or whatever. But for me personally, as you know, been around Christians all my life, you know, when I was a kid, it seemed like you didn't talk about atheists that much. You didn't have to. You just assumed everybody already believed in God. If somebody showed up at your church and they weren't a Christian, then all you know, if you were trying to get them saved, so to speak, all you had to do is, you know, scare them a little bit. To be honest, scare them to the altar, because you automatically assume as soon as they came that, well, we know they believe in God. They already believe in God. They already know that God's real, and they know that they're on their way to hell. So it should be pretty easy to get them to the altar at that point, right? If you've got them that far already, as soon as they come in the door, it's pretty easy. I think now when people come in, you ain't so sure about that. I mean, you wouldn't think an atheist would be in your church, but hey, I've gone to church a couple times in the last few years. I usually go every Christmas to watch a Christmas play with my nephews. So there's that. That's usually about the only time I go. But maybe there's funerals. You know, I was recently at a funeral. There's preachers there. And recently my wife even asked me, she's like, is it just me, or did it feel like they were preaching directly to you? And I was like, well, kind of, but also my wife, even though she's lived here for over 6 years, she still hasn't got completely accustomed to living in the Bible Belt. And I told her, you know, I tried to explain to her that's generally how funerals go around here. You know, you spend a little time talking about the deceased, and then you try to preach to the sinners. That's just how it goes. But when I was a kid, like, I remember the preacher would get up, and a lot of times if he opened his Bible, you know, they'd always start with a scripture verse, and then they'd kind of preach from there. And if they started with Luke chapter 16, you were just like, oh man, like we're in for it. Because that was the story of the rich man and Lazarus, and the rich man died and opened his eyes in hell. And it was one of the few scriptures in the Bible that talked about hell, because there's not a whole lot about hell in the Bible. And so that was a go-to verse. And all you had to do is just, like I said, is scare that person. Because whoever, you know, if somebody walked into the church, and like in our case, it was real easy to see who the sinners were according to us. Because if they walked in and they weren't dressed the way we were dressed, or, you know, if they were wearing makeup and jewelry, well, you know, obviously they're sinners on their way to hell. And they might not even know it. They might think they're saved, but we'll convince them they're not. But, you know, even me, you know, when I left church, I got out of church, and for years, I lived that way. I've talked about it before. Like, I was not in church, but I still believed in God. I wasn't a Christian, but I was a believer. If you asked me, I would have told you, yeah, I'm a sinner. On my way to hell. I'm going to hell. Going to split hell wide open. I sometimes question how much I believe that, because it seems crazy that you would believe that and still be able to live your life. It just seems absurd. But so it kind of makes you think maybe deep down you didn't really believe it, you know, even though you said you did. But I don't know. I can't even distinguish between whether I did or didn't, to be honest. But so it was pretty easy. I remember how, too, like, you know, because I'm older, I remember a world before the internet. So for those of you that are older can remember that, you can remember how like urban legends and these myths and stuff that, you know, some of these things that go around the internet today, and if you have any shred of common sense, you can look into it and see it's false. Well, back then there was nothing to look into. So you could tell people pretty much anything, and maybe they wouldn't believe it, but they really had no way to disprove it. You know, it was like, I get cracked up thinking about like Halloween, you know, going trick-or-treating as a kid, and remembering your mom going through your candy piece by piece, just tearing it off, looking for glass in your Halloween candy. And at the time it didn't seem crazy, but looking back at it now, it's like, oh my God, like the only place they took us was like people that they knew. Like we were going, it's like, did you really think Uncle Harry was putting glass in the candy? Why Uncle Harry? I don't have an Uncle Harry. Anyway, like, so they could tell you anything, and there's so many stories in church that you would hear that now you know are obviously untrue. Like, you know, it's scientifically impossible for a bumblebee to fly. Like, all scientists have said it's not possible that a bumblebee can fly, yet it flies. That can only be God. And now we know that's not true, but they told us that for the truth, and I was just like, man, you know, like I just bought into all that hook, line, and sinker. Like I went to a Christian school, and I literally had teachers tell us about how they drilled down to the, I thought they said the center of the earth, I don't know, like maybe so many miles, like these scientists were drilling into the earth, and then they dropped a recorder in there, like some sort of sound recorder, and they picked up all these screams. Well, I mean, obviously you can look at it up today and know that that's, you know, just some urban legend that's been passed down, but they told us that as the truth in a Christian school, Christian school, but it was a school, and my teachers told me that. So you can understand why now when they try to tell me how wrong I am, why I kind of roll my eyes a little bit, and why I really have no reason to trust anything that they have to say. So it was easy. When they come in, just scare them a little bit. The preacher would literally spend 45 minutes just talking about how hot hell was, and how, like, thirsty you're going to be. You'll never have another drink of water. How miserable you'll be, and how you'll think about all those times. You'll think about this night right here where I give an opportunity for you to come and pray and you turned it down. You'll think about that over and over and over, and you'll just beg, oh, if I could just have one drink of water, and you'll kick and scream, and there'll be gnashing of teeth and fire and brimstone, all that, you know, just, ooh, just, it was ghost stories, you know, it was just these ghost stories around the campfire. That was what preaching was, to scare you into coming to the altar. And that's why a lot of times it didn't stick. There'd be a lot of people that would get saved because they were scared to death, and then they would go out in the world, you know, go back to their jobs, whatever, you know, in the real world, and that fear would kind of wear off. And then if that's all the only reason you were there to begin with, you'd kind of, you know, it wouldn't be long. It just wouldn't last. You'd kind of quit going back to church. I had those problems. Like, I got saved multiple times. The first time I was saved, I was like 10 years old, and I think the last time, I believe, was around 18 or something. I can't remember. But I was saved probably at least 4 times, I want to say. And I remember one time, like, we used to have all kinds of revivals, and I used to think, man, I wish we could just stay in revival all the time, because, like, if you got out in the real world, like, at the time, I you know, I thought it was the devil. Like, the devil just, you know, wears on me, works on me. But really, it was just the reality of it. It's hard to, I think it's hard to keep believing something so absurd. But nowadays, we have the internet. We have people, I think, are a little smarter. That's hard to say because, I mean, when I'm on the internet, I see just how stupid people are. It's crazy. And the things they'll believe. It's ridiculous. But let's put it this way. I think the knowledge is there for those people that want it and that really seek it out. Their information is there. You can find the truth usually on most things if you really look hard enough. And so it's available now, where it wasn't available, you know, years ago. I literally, if I wanted to doubt what my teachers were telling me, what all the adults were telling me when I was a kid, like, I just had to doubt it in my own head. I didn't have anything to back it up. I didn't, you know, there was nobody else telling me, oh, what they're telling you is BS. Nobody, you know, there was nobody else. There was no counterpoint, no argument to it. I remember one time in my life as a kid meeting an atheist, and it blew my mind because I didn't think they existed. You know, they didn't talk about, you didn't hear preachers talk about atheists that much. Every now and then you'd hear, you know, about the atheist in the foxhole, but it just didn't seem to come up that much. And maybe it did other places, but not around here, not here in the Bible Belt. You didn't have to worry about that thing, you know, that kind of thing. But now, even here, even in the Bible Belt, even, you know, in this super ultra conservative area, there's a lot of kids growing up that are, you know, questioning it. A lot of kids that call it BS. They're just not buying into it. A lot of kids that actually pick up the book and read it. Like, there's that, and man, that's why I encourage reading your Bible. If you're a Christian, read that Bible every day. Read it cover to cover. Pick it up, don't stop reading that thing. Because there's so many Christians that they believe in this sugar-coated version of Jesus and God, and God is love, and this Joel Osteen type of religion. And why would you knock that, you know? And maybe if that's what it was, maybe I wouldn't. If Christianity was all love and acceptance and being good to your neighbor and all that, you know, maybe you believe some BS, but it does everybody good. Who cares? But the problem is it's not that. There's so much harm in it. So I encourage so many people to read the Bible, and then, you know, when young people that have the information today available to them that they do, and then they're picking up this book of just nonsense. This book that talks about animal sacrifices. This book that talks about, you know, a virgin birth, and you know, some a deity impregnating a teenage girl so that his son could be born through a human and grow up and then be tortured and put to death because we have to have a blood sacrifice so that that deity can forgive people, because without that, you know, how could you possibly forgive anyone without a blood sacrifice? Like, when they read stuff like that, when they read about a God that's supposed to be loving and caring and compassionate, and they read about him commanding, you know, his people to slaughter like entire towns and to kill every man, woman, and child, and even the animals, and the only people he ever seems to spare is the virgin, like the young girls, the little girls, and then you make sex slaves out of them, basically. When they read stuff like that and they realize, oh man, what is this? And a lot of times they'll try to make sense out of, okay, maybe not all of this Bible's right. You know, let's throw out the Old Testament. Let's just look at the New Testament. And we'll just pick out the parts we like. But then they'll realize that even in the New Testament there's problems. But it'll send them on this journey where they try to they try to make their religion fit in this modern world, and they try to make it fit to this idea of what God is in their head. And the more they read that Bible, and the more we progress as a people, and become more caring and loving and accepting, and understand more about how this world works and how we should be, how we should act, the harder it's going to be for that Bible to fit, you know, into their idea of what a true loving God should be. And it makes it harder and harder. And now, when these people go to church, now the preacher can't just get up there and talk about how hot hell is. He can't just get up there and try to convince you, hey, you're running out of time, you might die tomorrow. Now he's got to go all the way back to square one and convince these people, convince these kids that God is real. And some of these older preachers, like these younger preachers, they're kind of getting trained to do that right off the bat. A lot of these older guys, these guys that are about out the door as far as preaching goes, they've never had to do that. They don't understand that. That's baffling to them. They don't, like, how do I go back? Like, I got to convince you God is real, and they go back and they start trying to explain to you how God is, the reasons why you should believe. And maybe, just maybe, there'll be a lot of preachers that are forced to do that, and in doing so, they'll go through the same process. They're going to have to pick up that Bible and start looking at it in a new way. Okay, I can't scare them anymore. Now I got to prove God's real. How am I going to do that? Maybe I'll have to look towards science, try to see where I can fit the Bible in that makes sense with science, or, this and that. And when they try to work out that, maybe they'll start asking their own questions. They're going to be forced to. And as time goes on, I believe it's only going to get more and more like that, where there's going to be less and less room for these just barbaric gods, whether it be the Christian God, the Muslim God, the Hindus, whatever it may be. There's going to be less and less room for those kinds of gods, and they're going to die out, hopefully, just like all the other gods before them. We don't need them. Now, I don't think that's coming anytime soon, but what I do think could happen is we could turn a corner to where they lose their power. And that's why I think, like here in America, why you're seeing such like the religious get so loud, and I think they see it coming. They're pushing so hard because they know they're this close to losing some of that power. They're not afraid of being persecuted. They say they're afraid of being persecuted, of being treated unfairly, but what it is, they're afraid of losing privilege, because they have privilege right now, and they're able to push their beliefs onto us, and they're scared that they won't be able to do that anymore. They want to teach our kids like BS in the classroom. They want to teach this stuff. If they had their way, they would be teaching your kids. Like, I know, like the Christians around here, if they had their way, they would be teaching creationism in public school. If they could do that, they'd be teaching the Bible in public school. And I'm not going to stand by and watch that happen. I'm going to fight like hell. You better bet I am. And as much as that scares me, as much as it scares me to see like this Trump administration and all the just the bull crap, and it seems like a lot of conservatives gaining power, I see liberals and progressives and people fighting back. And I know not all atheists are liberals or progressives. I know there's a lot of conservative atheists that being an atheist doesn't make you a liberal, but I see people fighting back and against it, and even liberal Christians, people that are still in that phase where they're sugarcoating their own religion. They have a different idea of God than what is actually, in the Bible. And so I hope that good wins out. And what I hope to see in my lifetime, because I know religion isn't going to die out, but what I hope to see is for it to not be so prevalent. Like, for it to be, okay, for all of you believers, for all of you people that still want to hold on to these ancient gods, keep doing what you do. You have all the freedom to do that. Here in America, you have all the freedom. You can go to the church you want to go to. You can worship how you want. There's no one stopping you. You can pray anytime you want. You can carry your Bible to school. You really can. You can pray in school. Like, if it's done right. Like, don't be mad just because you can't force it on other people, but you can do what you want. You can serve God however, it is you want, as long as you're not pushing it on other people or hurting other people. So let those people do their thing, and let's see it gradually back out of government. And the way we do that is by making atheism more and more popular. So, yeah, sometimes you hate to be that annoying guy that's always like, yeah, well, maybe God's not real, but it's a good thing for it to be more popular. It's a good thing for people to hear from people like us, to know we're out there, and for people that maybe are already thinking like we're thinking, they can speak up. Because the more we do it, the more we challenge it, then the more these preachers and believers are going to have to change their game up. They can't just scare us into, with hell, fire, and brimstone anymore. They gotta, convince us God is real. Because here's the thing: if you can convince me God is real, I believe. Like, I have no, there's no reason for me to just deny God's existence if there was evidence of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, what would that profit me? Like, if I knew in my heart that God was real, but I got on here and said, no, God's not real because I'm scared of hell, I'm still going to go to hell. So if I knew God was real, I might not approve of what he does. I may still think he's evil, but at least then I'll be like, oh man, this is screwed up. I'm going to hell. I gotta figure something out. Maybe I'll be trying to bargain with God. Like I have no agenda. You know what I mean? Like, if you could prove to me God's real, like if you could show me evidence, I'd be on board, because I want to believe true things. Like, so the ball's in your court. Just prove it. Like, show me evidence. Prove to me God is real. That is your job now. I know y'all went many years, didn't have to do that. You went many years where you could feed me, when I was a kid, you could feed me any kind of BS and I'd believe it. Those days are over. I've grown up. And kids today, they're not as gullible as I was when I was a kid. Kids today, they're going to require some evidence, because, you know what, they can fact check they can fact check your ass. And they're not just going to buy anything you throw at them. So, you're going to have to up your game, preachers. You're going to have to convince us that your God is real, or else he's going to die, just like all the gods before him. I appreciate you guys watching. My name's Joe. This is Rebels Advocate. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. If you want to support the show, like our good patrons, which I appreciate so much, including our $10 patron, Brandon Shaw, you can do so at patreon.com/TheRebelsAdvocate. Thanks so much, guys. Until next time, I'll see you later.